Welcome back to another Deep Quote. I'm D.
I'm Pod.
And today we're going to be talking about a quote from Principal Kip Motta of Rich Middle School near Salt Lake City in Utah. And the quote is, "They ask each other to dance, and we ask them to say yes." Now, on the surface, that doesn't sound that bad. Hey, dance with each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Middle
good.
schoolers have dances all the time.
Sure.
This seems normal.
Also keep in mind that this is a middle school out in the country. It's about 125 students in the middle school, so it's across 3 grades. So it's a fairly small school. A lot of the kids are probably going to know each other, but the crux is the principal is saying we ask them to say yes to each other when one person wants to dance, which means, this got brought to people's attention when a little girl came home. She was very upset, was talking to her parents, saying, I was forced to say yes, and I wasn't permitted to say no to a boy when he asked me to dance with him. So what's wrong with this?
So the thing that jumps out is that we're inherently teaching little girls, hey, if a boy wants to touch you in a way that maybe you're uncomfortable, that now you have to accept that he has to touch you.
So there's a component of the fact that dancing is a physical activity that puts you in close proximity with someone else. You are becoming physically involved in some way with another person and saying you are encouraged to say yes, meaning that we encourage you in middle school to be physically engaged with someone else, even if you are uncomfortable with being around that person.
Yeah, and it's not just physical contact, right? Dancing has a certain component of you dance with someone that you're dating, you dance with someone that you're romantically attracted to. And so for you to say that you have to dance with somebody is kind of implying that you have to allow people to go further than you would be comfortable.
Now, when news organizations reached out to the principal, she said, well, I didn't know that this particular girl was uncomfortable with the boy, and
The principal is a man. He.
Kip, sorry. Regardless, the principal said that had the little girl reached out and complained and said, I'm not comfortable with this dancing with this boy, that there wouldn't have been a problem. She wouldn't have been forced to. But it sounds like the default answer that's encouraged is you should default to yes, and if no, let the principal know. And
ahead of time, so you have to call out all of the boys in your class that you don't feel comfortable dancing with.
Right. And it seems odd compared to the culture that is very much being pushed right now of the idea of rape culture, that we're saying that it's okay for rape to be pervasive in our society, and this seems like the closest example that I've seen of actual rape culture being not established, but technically speaking, since it's children and we're establishing them in culture, it's establishing a culture where you shouldn't say no, and that unless you have a good reason before an event starts to turn someone down for an activity, even if it's a physically involved activity, that you should just assume that, yeah, we're going to be doing this. And on the contrary, there's a term that I like called enthusiastic consent, which is for groups that are going to be having sex with each other. The idea is if you ask someone, hey, let's have sex, and they don't enthusiastically say, yeah, let's do that, that means no. That anything except for enthusiastic consent means no. And this along those lines is basically saying you should assume yes, and unless you are so off-put by this that you beforehand come and talk to an intermediary person to mitigate the interaction, then you should assume that you're going to go forward with it. And I feel like most of Western culture is, no, we respect the individual and the individual's rights and the individual decisions, including that of children, and particularly with young children that don't understand sexuality yet or just starting to learn about sexuality. It's no one can force you to do anything physically that you're uncomfortable with.
Yeah, and the principal's excuse in this particular instance was that they don't want there to be any kids feeling left out. That like, oh, I'm the unpopular kid and I want to dance with someone and everyone is just going to say no to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal of trying to spare some children's feelings, like, it's a noble goal.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think that this is the appropriate way of doing that.
Well, and it's a goal of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
That's a word that has been getting thrown around a lot lately, that we want to be an inclusive culture and make sure that everyone is included, no one is excluded. And, well, in this case, the way that you do that is you say everyone has to dance with everyone if at least one person wants to. Because if one person doesn't want to, then that means that the person that does is being actively rejected. And we're not being inclusive. We're rejecting them from our personal bubble, and that's inherently non-inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So in the spirit of inclusivity and equality, everyone should say yes to everyone else. And that would extend, and we've brought up rape culture already, and it seems like a stretch, but these are physical activities. So the question becomes, if you aren't allowed to say no to dancing, are you allowed to say no to slow dancing? Are you allowed to say no to holding hands, kissing, hugging? At what level do you start being able to say no? And if the idea is we need to further inclusivity or be a more inclusive culture to everyone and make sure that everyone has their needs met, one of the major needs in humanity is sexual desire. And there's a group of people I believe referred to as incels, of involuntary celibates.
Mm-hmm.
Generally males who are very socially awkward, that can't find any women to have sex with, and so they're involuntarily celibate. In that, going to an age where sex is acceptable. So middle school, we're not really looking at sex yet, but
they're getting close.
They're getting closer for at least doing things behind their parents' back or without their parents knowing about it. But once you become a legal adult and sex becomes a regular thing, and in our culture, in Western culture, having sex with people, even outside of marriage, is a generally accepted thing. With this ideology of you are encouraged to say yes as the default, and only say no if you have said that ahead of time. Meaning that you can't really revoke consent, or it's hard to revoke consent. We're encouraging people to say, if someone wants to have sex with you, you should let them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the bigger issue here is just the telling kids that, like, your body does not, like, your own body's barriers don't matter. And that, like, oh, if someone wants to do something with you, then you have to allow them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just like a particular act. It's a generic thing of like, oh, your body doesn't get to be your own in any regard, whether that's sex
or you have to get validation from someone else. Like, even as a kid, you have to validate with me if you want to avoid doing something with your body.
That this principle owns your body basically, and is like, oh, well, anyone in your class is allowed to do what they want on this dance floor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want it to not happen, you have to go talk to this random guy, basically. I mean, principals, even in a small school like that, you're probably not seeing that person very often.
Probably. And
like,
it can be more intimidating to go complain to a principal that, hey, this boy is making me uncomfortable. And the degree to which you may say, no, I don't want to dance with you, is a very different degree to than saying, I am going to go tell on you.
Yeah, because, like, I can see if I think back to when I was that age, if you put me in this situation and there was a boy in my class or a boy that I was dealing with that I didn't like and didn't want to dance with, I would feel obligated that I have to be able to justify why I don't want to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't have a really, really good reason, like if none of the boys had tried doing anything overtly dangerous to me, I would feel like, oh, well, he's just creepy, so that's not good enough.
Especially when the principal is encouraging you to say yes by default and say, yeah, you should definitely do things.
Yeah, or like, oh, he seems a little weird sometimes, or he, you know, there's rumors that he tries to look up girls' skirts.
And
Are
are
you gonna
you
go-
going to tell that to the principal?
Yeah, are you going to go tell the principal that? Like, the principal's not going to believe you. Why would the principal believe you if there's just, quote unquote unfounded rumors?
And the short
Like
answer.
sixth graders pick up on those types of things of like, who the creep is in the class.
And the short answer is basically you should be able to say no for whatever reason. It could be a preference. It could be I don't really feel like dancing right now with anyone, let alone a person that I actually dislike. And there really shouldn't need to be any interference from another person. And I think the critical component of this is how should it be presented? Because it sounds like they weren't forcing the kids to dance with each other. They were encouraging them, but using language of you should say yes, which to a kid translates to say yes. That's the part of the sentence that they'll pick up on, not the you should, but if not, then you can just say no.
Well, it doesn't sound like they were really given any alternatives. Like the principal is saying there are alternatives, and the alternative is talk to the principal, which feels like overkill. Like, I think if it was presented in a way that was like, hey, we are encouraging you to dance with everybody at this upcoming school dance. However, if you don't want to dance with somebody, quietly say no to them. Politely have some, give them some language of like, here's how you say no politely. And then you tell the boys and the girls, probably separately, honestly, what a gracious no looks like.
So that they can be informed of you aren't being forced to do anything that you don't want to. Here's how to appropriately and kindly handle rejecting someone. Because I think the main concern is they want people to feel included, and they don't want people to be rejected because, oh, God forbid we hurt someone's feelings. And the problem with that is if your solution to avoiding rejection is saying don't reject under any circumstance, or encouraging them to accept as opposed to reject. No, teach them how to politely reject and politely communicate a rejection.
And like, you can say that alongside saying like, in general, we would like everyone to be free to dance with everyone else. You just have to give an out.
And say, hey, give it a try. You never know who might actually be fun to dance with. You give things a try, be open-minded, and communicating it in that way of be open-minded, give things a try.
Dance with someone you normally wouldn't spend time with.
Yeah.
Like, saying it in positive ways like that, but also having the option of like, if you have a reason to not want to dance with this person, like they have been bullying you every day this past school year, or they steal your stuff sometimes, and you just don't want to be around them.
Or if you just don't like their personality, that
they called you fat yesterday.
It needs to be, or they accidentally, while they were asking you to dance, a little spittle came out and it got on you, and that disgusted you. You can just say no for that. It doesn't have to be a planned thing. It just could just be, I don't at the time of response feel like dancing with you.
I'm just saying, giving them a list of reasons why it may be appropriate to say no, so that it's not just
or just in general communicate
because you
that,
hate the person,
right? Or just in general communicate you are encouraged to do this, but you can say no for any reason. We're not forcing you to do anything. And one of the things that I was thinking about around this quote is how is this different from, for instance, being on a sports team? That a lot of times when a gym teacher or gym instructor is pairing you guys up or pairing kids up for a sport, you may not have a choice in who you're paired up with and who you have to work together with. How is dancing different?
Dancing is generally going to be a lot more physical.
Physically close and actually interacting.
Close and interacting, and like you're supposed to try to get in time with the person, which means that there is some level of like you get to feed off of this person's energy, and if you don't go well with their energy, that's not cool.
And I think an additional portion of it that sets apart sports from dancing is that dancing has frequently been trying to facilitate partnership, particularly in a sexual sense that when you have a large group of people that are single and haven't gotten to know each other yet, having dances where you're getting put in close proximity with other people. So, for instance, line dancing and square dancing, where you constantly are shifting partners. It's for a very brief period that you dance with each person, but it gives you a little bit of interaction with that person to bring people closer together, and it's intended to let people search for sparks between them that they maybe didn't know were there. I think that the thing is, there is a sexual connotation to that, and if you're doing line dancing and square dancing, then saying while you're going through the rotation, you're going to be partnered up with everyone. That I think is very different than saying everyone is a potential partner, and if that person seeks you out specifically, that you must say yes, or that you should say yes. I think those are very different contexts.
Yeah, well, like with a square dance or line dancing, you really are not dancing with a single person.
You're dancing with a group.
For more than like a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
So it's not feasible to say no to a specific person. Like, if you know that like there's that one creep that's going to follow you around in the square dance, like, okay, I'm just not going to partake at all.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. Those are also voluntary. That if you don't feel like participating, that if there's a group of 20 people that are going to be dancing, and there's one person that you really, really don't like and don't want to dance with in any way, you can just sit out. And assuming that, being encouraged to go dancing is one thing. With being encouraged to dance with a group is very different than saying you should dance with anyone who wants to dance with you individually. Because dancing with someone individually is a much more intimate thing than dancing with a group where you're briefly facing one person for a short time and then facing another person.
If you're even facing a person. Like, the way that a lot of line dances work is you're really not in any contact.
Square dancing you are. That there is physical contact and you switch between partners, and it's
very fleeting is
sure
the point.
But it's a way of facilitating more physical relationships than before the dance. But this is again a very different context because it's a one-on-one interaction as opposed to a group interaction that has brief one-on-one interactions.
Yeah, well, we're going off on that tangent. Like, I agree with your point.
I'm just saying that the reason that this seems problematic, and I just want to be very specific on most people that I think hear this of you should say yes, that if that's what's being told to the kids, if you should say yes to dancing with other people, even if you don't like them, unless you come talk to me about it, something feels wrong about that, and I'm trying to establish exactly why is that wrong. And I think it's because of the fact that it's a one-on-one, specifically initiated, intimate interaction that we're saying you should say yes.
Well, I think going back to your gym example, if you were paired off with someone to do something in gym class, like, I don't know, wrestling, and you don't want to touch the other person, it's generally acceptable to be like, I would like to sit out right now. And gym teachers are usually pretty accepting of that like, for whatever reason, you don't feel like being in physical contact with someone. Like, they might give you a weird look of like, oh, you're only telling me this now after I paired you up. But like, it's generally not as frowned upon.
Yeah, and it's just the idea of there's a difference between, for instance, working in a group of making a presentation, thinking back to middle school and high school. All right, you're in a group, you have to work together as a group. That's something that you have to learn how to work together with people throughout your entire life. The difference here is that you're not just making a presentation where you have to be around each other and talking with each other and communicating with each other. It's a physical interaction, and it's the physical component of dancing. And the fact that in a one-on-one context, that becomes an intimate relationship to whatever degree that intimacy goes, since we're talking about middle school dancing, it's not going to be super intimate. But
like for them, it's extremely intimate.
Exactly, because you may be getting closer to someone of the opposite sex than you usually do, which means you're starting to encroach on those intimate barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So if it is intimate to them and you're encouraging them to say yes to intimacy, that I think is why this seems so wrong on the face of it, is the fact that you're encouraged to say yes to intimacy even if you're not enthusiastic about it, which goes against the idea of enthusiastic consent, where you should only be saying yes if you actually really want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it is, I understand where Principal Motta is coming from, that he wants to encourage people to get out of their comfort zone. And it's important to get out of your comfort zone and do things that you wouldn't otherwise do, because maybe you'll find new people or new experiences that you like. And I think that that's the intent of this policy, is to say, try new things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason that news organizations are covering this as, hey, maybe there's a negative to this, is because it feels like it's perpetuating or establishing a rape culture where you should do physical things with other people if that person wants to do it, unless you have a really good reason not to. It's like, no, when you're doing something intimate, the assumption is you have complete control of your body. You're encouraged to do things that you wouldn't necessarily otherwise do, experiment with stuff. That's good, but don't do anything that you absolutely are not comfortable with.
Well, like, even in the adult world, there are very few physical interactions that I have with anyone that I don't have the option to say no to. Like, what would they be? If I'm actively getting arrested, I can't really say no to that.
Sure.
Certain medical procedures, you can't really say no to that, but you can request, like, that there's a chaperone in the room.
I mean, you can either decline a you always have the option to decline a medical procedure.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but like, you still need to have it done.
If you need to have it done, you can choose how you have it done.
You can choose how you have it done, who does it, if you have a female nurse in the room with you at the time. Like, that's a common thing in women's health. Beyond that, like, you can decline a handshake. You can you can cut your own hair. You can pretty much go through life without having any kind of physical contact with anybody.
Which is not necessarily a good way to go about things.
I wasn't saying it was a good thing. I'm saying that, like, if the goal is to be like, oh, well, you know, it's okay that we're making you dance with other people because, like, you'll have to do things that you don't want to do all the time. It's like, well, actually, like, adults, you don't have to come in physical contact with anybody.
No, again, on the flip side, so supporting this policy, it encourages people to do, encourages kids to do things that they otherwise wouldn't want to do, to get them out of their comfort zone, which is arguably a good thing, because if you train, let's assume you train the opposite of, you can just stay in your comfort zone all the time. You'll never take risks. You'll never learn what new things you might like. And that will extend to just social interactions of, well, I never want to be in close physical proximity. Now I don't really want to sit next to people that I don't like, and I'm just going to shut everyone else out of my life. It makes you antisocial.
Yeah, and, like, I wasn't saying that it would be good for them to say, like, oh, you can dance with whoever you want and say no and not have any kind of encouragement to say yes. I think encouraging people to say yes is a good thing.
Yep.
It needs to come with, how do you say no? And that how you say no needs to be something that is actually feasible. Because telling the principal ahead of time that, hey, Jim Bob is a creep.
Yeah.
And, you know, he doesn't wash his hands and he smells bad and I don't want to be near him.
Or I just don't like his personality.
Or I don't like him. You know, or whatever. You know, he stole my pen last week and I'm really mad at him for that.
Yeah. And
like, but middle schoolers have 1.5 million reasons why they don't like you, especially middle school girls.
Yep. Yeah. So it sounds like we're largely in agreement that both extremes of this are bad. The you must always say yes is bad. The you can say no for whatever reason, and you don't have to interact with anyone on any level ever. Both of those are just as bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because one makes everyone antisocial, and one means you can't say no to anything, and so rape stops becoming a thing. If you can't say no, then there's no such thing as rape.
Mm-hmm.
So both sides are really, really bad. It sounds like we agree that a balance of encourage kids to say yes, encourage them to even dance with people that they might be uncomfortable with, try things out, but that doesn't mean you have to do anything. You have the right to choose. You have the right to exercise your individual rights of dancing with who you want and not dancing with who you don't want.
Mm-hmm.
But think about, maybe you just don't know the person, and this is a chance to get to know them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So presenting it in that light of not forcing them to do anything, letting them know that there's an out, but still encouraging them, saying it's a good thing to at least try. I think that that's what they were trying to do. And just the way that it was implemented with the particular girl that complained about it to her parents, that the way it's coming out makes it seem worse than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the heart of the principle is in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to add?
No, I think that was about it.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time.
Hi everyone! Thanks so much for listening to this discussion. Your interest really means a lot to us. If you want to help support this podcast and our goal of sparking discussions and bringing people together, check out how to contribute in the description. Happy deeping!
The content of this podcast does not reflect the views and opinions held by anyone involved. We will frequently be playing the devil's advocate strictly for the purpose of exploration of ideas and not as an endorsement of any subsequent action. We condemn all acts of violence other than those of self-defense against physical harm.